Okay, we are up and running. Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood from the Raymond Wood podcast. We are excited to bring episode number 50. Now, for anyone who's been following since the first episode, we kicked off this podcast in 2023 and we were hoping to do 12 episodes a year. I think we've surpassed that by doing 50 in just over 2.5 years. And we are super excited to bring in a very special guest who's not only got Australian experience, but a lot of high-level European experience in her fields of work. And I'd love to introduce you to Kate Robinson. Kate, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Ray. And yeah, episode 50, congratulations. That's pretty good. Pretty epic.
Thank you. Now, for anyone obviously who doesn't know who Kate Robinson is, if you could maybe in a little 60-second snippet talk a little bit about yourself, what your field of work is, and where you've been over the past couple of years.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Kate. I have been living and working over in Europe for the last 9 years. I've actually just come back to Australia, which is a pretty big adjustment. My original background was in diagnostics, so I worked in radiation technology for about 9 years, and then from there I moved into movement. So I moved into yoga and then mindfulness meditation. I went and did my postgrad studies in psychology, somatic trauma therapy, and now the main focus of my work is breathwork. So I've done a lot of different study into breathwork and how we can use various different breathwork tools to not only regulate the nervous system, but increase performance and to get into those deeper parts of the psyche to release trauma and have some pretty cool and profound experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a great summary. And I was thinking back, obviously, I only met you a couple of months ago, but I remember my first experience with breathwork, and it was 2011. And I was working at a professional football club in England. And our coach at the time was very progressive with the men's team, and they had a breathwork specialist come over from Holland. And it was the talk of the town. Everyone was laughing, making jokes about it. Breath work. What do you mean breath work? We breathe every day. What can they teach us? But I think it's come a long way since 2011. And a lot of it, I've found that tends to come from people maybe having really bad things go on in their life, or you have an incident that happens, tends for these ideas to come about. But then we obviously then see the benefits of them. And that was one of the first questions I wanted to lead on. So when we talk about something that can happen in your life, and I've read a little bit about your backstory, a little bit about some burnout yourself, what actually happened during that period, and what did it teach you about the mind and body when you went through that experience?
So I went through a pretty big burnout in my late 20s, so a while ago now. I was just super overworked. I was working in diagnostics and healthcare for about 9 years or so, and I'd worked around Australia and in the UK in that profession. I had had a big heartbreak. I was super anxious. I just was not feeling happy at all. So I was just really unfulfilled in general at that time of my life. And the biggest thing for me is that, so I'm one of those really unlucky people that when I'm really stressed and not feeling well, I can't sleep at all. When all you actually want to do is just sleep and recover, pardon me, and, kind of get over this hump. But I can't sleep at all when it happens. And I actually got to the period where I was an insomniac. So I was sleeping maybe sorry, pardon me. Across my throat now. I got to the period where I was an insomniac and I was sleeping maybe 1 to 1.5 hours per night. Like even sleeping pills couldn't help me. So I had sleeping pills and I would wake up, 2 hours after taking those, head off to the hospital, go and work my long shifts there, on-call work, all of that and whatnot. And I just kind of got to a breaking point, to be honest. I thought something really has to give and something has to change for me at this point because I just can't go on. Sleep is so important. Also, sleep just as much as breath work is a really big topic for a lot of people at the moment. But during that time, the thing that really saved me was my yoga practice. So I would, no matter how exhausted I was, make it to a yoga studio every single day and do just a 60-minute or a 90-minute practice. And at the time, what I was actually practicing as far as yoga was something called Ashtanga yoga. And with Ashtanga yoga, it's a huge emphasis on breathing. So you breathe, you expand your lungs. For every movement, there is a breath in or a breath out. And then it's a little bit cliche, but from there I decided, right, I'm done. I'm quitting my job. I'm changing my life. I'm going to go live in an ashram in India, studying yoga. My parents were, pretty stressed out about that, I can tell you. And that's what I did for 3 months. I went and lived in an ashram, and I was so lucky during that time because as I was studying yoga, I also had this amazing philosophy teacher, Sunil Sharma, and he's a very well-known pranayama teacher as well. And pranayama is the traditional yogic breathing style, so they use lots of different breathing. And I think at that time we were waking up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and every day before we went and did our yoga practice, we would do 45 minutes to an hour of just breathing, chanting, meditation. And that had a huge impact on how I was feeling. I really noticed how it was changing the way I was sleeping, how I was showing up for my intense yoga practice. It was something that really gave me that doorway into breathwork. I didn't pursue breathwork specifically after that. I went more into the yoga field, but then I started studying a lot to do with mindfulness, meditation, because I'm so interested in how the body and the mind are connected. Because for me, when I've been extremely stressed, it's been moments of my brain is overactive. It's not that my body or not feeling my body being in that stress state, but the thoughts that I'm having in that time or during that time were the things that were actually fueling this breath response in my body. So I went into the meditation, the mindfulness. I started looking into studying somatic therapy. So I became an integrative somatic trauma therapist. I did my postgrad studies in psychology, and I just felt like something was still really missing. And it all kind of came full circle, and I went back to breathwork. And that was when the penny dropped, so to say. There was, I just saw in my clients myself, so I was working with a lot of corporate clients over in Germany as well. But there was this really big shift, and people were leaving the experience, like you said, the talk of the town, right? You would go in and say, hey, I'm going to teach you some breathing techniques. And everyone would kind of roll their eyes like, this is a bit woo-woo, whatever. And then afterwards, it would be like 10 people gathered around you like, what the hell was that? I feel amazing. I notice I'm doing this, that, and the next thing during my day, holding my breath, for example. Are there any other techniques I can use? And I got obsessed, and I'm forever a student of breathwork too. I'm always learning more and more things about it. I think it's very rare that you know everything, and there's so much research going into it. So it was a pretty long journey, but that's how I ended up where I am now. And now I founded my company, Parnabeat, which is a focus on teaching people breathwork skills and also training others in breathwork. And of course, where I met you, so I still work in studios and whatnot to teach other people or guide people through breathwork experiences.
Yeah, I think the universe has got a special way of opening it up for meeting certain people, and I think it was meant to happen. And I think for my athletes on the program, as I said, we work probably around about 5,000 players globally currently. Mm-hmm. And my first experience, it was so funny when you talk about woo-woo. And I remember being in the club in 2011 to 14 in England, and this is a Premier League club, big money everywhere, and they're all laughing about this breathwork coach, and it's all too woo-woo. And then I got back to Australia in 2015, and it was ironic that you were talking about in the yoga practices and making noises with your throat and vibration. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I worked with a guy whose wife was stage 4 with cancer, and she got given months to live. Yeah. And she decided to go to a place in Mexico, and she'd done a whole host of things, but the two main things she'd done was breath work every day and was vibrational work on top of fasting. And thankfully, 10, 12 years on, she's completely cleared of cancer. And Yeah, and they're in the belief, it's their belief that it was the breath work and the vibrational work and the fasting that done it. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not medically claiming that was correct, but that's what they say. And the stories that I've read and listened to, it shows you how important getting oxygen to the right parts of your body to take out the stress.
Yeah, and regulating your nervous system with your breath as well. So you give your body, your mind that moment to step into a parasympathetic state, and that's where the body and the mind start to heal themselves, and when you get anti-inflammatory effects. So when you're able to relax the body, to bring yourself back into that period where the body heals rather than always being in that stress state, that is where people start to see, really.
Yeah, so true. Now, you've been quite around a lot of the planet in your backstory, but I want to touch on Europe, specifically Germany, because obviously coming from a football background, Germany is the mecca of football, and you probably know that from living there for 8-9 years. What differences did you notice in how they approach performance, discipline and recovery compared to Australia?
Yeah, I mean, I think Europe's always a couple of steps ahead of Australia. I mean, like you said, they're the epicenter, right? This is like where everything's kind of going up in the northern hemisphere. We're just chilling out on, I was going to say little island. It's not a little island, obviously, down in the southern hemisphere. And what I really saw, so I lived in Berlin, and Berlin's also a really progressive place. There is a huge emphasis now on recovery, rest and recovery. I actually have a sponsorship with Nike, for example, where they brought me on to work underneath Nike as a breathwork, meditation and yoga teacher from them, or coach rather, that's what they call us. One of the coaches for Nike was the breathwork, meditation and yoga, which is a huge change to where their focus used to be, for example. Yeah. Whereas you come to Australia and Australians are so fit. Like, I always also think I'm really fit, and then I go and do a HIIT class here and I'm like, whoa, I got some work to do. But Australians are really, we have this, what it seems to me is this push to just do. And it's all about this, like, how hard can I push my body aesthetically? What can I look like, for example? And there's this big missing gap of actually allowing your body that rest and recovery in between. And without one, you actually can't have the other. To have high performance, you also have to know how to relax your nervous system, how to breathe. So that's the biggest difference. I think although there are some amazing athletes over in Australia and in Europe, I think Europe has, they're a bit more open, or particularly in Berlin, where I was, a bit more open to the woo-woo, into, nervous system regulation techniques. Yeah, and that's around all parts. I mean, it's also, like I said, I was working with big corporates and whatnot over there too, also teaching teams how to breathe. And I think we're always a couple of steps behind you. It's like we have the saunas, we have the plunge pools, we have everything built into Australia, but it's like, all right, I've got 5 minutes to do this. I'm going to jump into that pool. I'm going to do this magnesium thing. And you see it, even at some of the huge big centers here where you've got the infrared saunas or the saunas, and people are sitting in there on their phones rather than just allowing themselves to relax. So I think that's probably the biggest difference in that realm.
Yeah, I think it's all about being present in the moment, and that's one of the lessons I've had to learn as well, because I think I've got sucked into that Australian life over the last 19 years of 100 mile an hour and just go. But yeah it's important
like
to switch off.
A-type personalities. Everyone's like, oh, tick it off.
Now, Kate, at what point in your life did you realise that breathing wasn't just about like relaxation, but it was actually something that could impact not only your performance, but as you said, your recovery as well?
So, I mean, because I started off learning about breathwork with yoga. I went into pranayama first, and pranayama, like I said, it's a traditional yogic technique. So they actually teach you different forms of breathwork. They don't teach you the science behind it necessarily, but teaching you breathwork to get you into different states within your nervous system. So upregulating for energy, they call it brain shining when you do specific carbon dioxide breathing within yoga, to really get yourself alert and put yourself into more of a sympathetic response, so a stress response. And then also breathing techniques to come into that rest and recovery. So I always knew that it was about all of these different facets, that it wasn't just about one or the other. But for me personally, I love exercising, but I'm far more of a strength girl, right? I like to do strength training. I don't like cardio so much. Of course I do it. It's good for you, da, da, da. But once I started learning more about breathwork, I actually started enjoying cardio as well. So that was a big thing, because I was realizing that the way that I was breathing when I had to have like big output from my workouts, I was fatiguing really, really quickly. I was always exhausted. And I was thinking, like, what's wrong? I'm doing a cycling fast 3 times a week, but I'm always so exhausted afterwards. And once I learned how to control my breath effectively, everything changed. 1, it became enjoyable. 2, I wasn't fatiguing, and my fitness just skyrocketed for me anyway. So that was the biggest changing point on a personal level with performance. But yeah, I've always kind of known that breathwork isn't just recovery. It's not just really, it's actually a really hard practice. So
But moving on, I think, or staying with that performance side, from a performance standpoint, what's actually happening in the body? So let's say we're talking about a football player or a soccer player. When they're breathing poorly, what's happening during a match, and can they do something to make it better?
yes. Most definitely. So when I like to say, because it refers to myself as well, the moment you lose your breath, you lose your workout, right?
Yeah.
When you are not breathing correctly, you're doing so much on a physiological level, right? So you're releasing too much carbon dioxide, you're over breathing, and there's a misconception that carbon dioxide is a waste product. It's not. It's a really important gas that we have within the system. It actually encourages oxygen to release out of our red blood cells and into our tissues, right? So that we get that energy to keep going. So, for example, a really simple thing, and a thing that most of us do, is breathing in and out through our mouths when we start to get fatigued or we feel like we need more air in. So we hyperventilate, right?
Yeah.
When we do that, we're blowing off too much CO2. We're not taking in effective oxygen, because when you breathe through your nose, you actually get much better expansion of the air sacs in your lungs called alveoli, so that exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is more effective and efficient. And then you're releasing too much CO2, so the oxygen that you do have is sticking onto your red blood cells. So it's sticking onto your hemoglobin, and it's not releasing into the cells. So you're fatiguing really quickly. Other things that are happening is that you're then going into a sympathetic nervous system activation. So you're stressing the nervous system out, and that's affecting your higher order thinking. So particularly in something like football, or for the Australians, soccer. We had that discussion the other day. You were like, football, you know what I'm talking about? When you're thinking about football or soccer, it's a sport that you need a lot of skill, and there's a lot of decision making going on, right? So it's not that just you're physically fit, but there's a lot of skillful acts. I mean, I don't play it. I don't know how to play it. So I'm not the best in knowing that, but from what I've seen it, and I've watched a lot of it, it's a very skillful sport. And when you go into a sympathetic state and your higher order thinking kind of reduces, what happens is you're making worse decisions. Your IQ is literally dropping because you're going into more of a state of stress and anxiety, and it's a survival mechanism of the body. The body is just thinking about getting through something rather than making really, informed decisions, or strategic decisions, I guess is a better thing to say.
I love that. We worked, I think I mentioned it, but we were very fortunate to work on a huge project for the FA and the Premier League in England, and we spent just over £2 billion on the project. But one of the areas that we looked at was what you call when a player bottles it, or they get the yips, and it, like, everything just, all of a sudden this player just doesn't look like the player he was. And we discovered a lot of that was down to the breathing and to fight or flight, and not doing things subconsciously and consciously. And it was, I think they got to it 2014, 2015. They knew a lot of it was to do with the breathing and the nervous system, but I don't think they knew the amount of detail that they've got now. Now, to finish a little bit off on that section with performance, can breathing actually improve performance, or is it just mainly a recovery tool, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. So how fit you are is not just about, your output and what you can put out. Your fitness is also really highly based on how quickly you can calm the nervous system after upregulation. So, if you can push your heart rate to its maximum, your fitness is also dependent on how much you can slow your heart rate down and how quickly you can do that, right? And that's, again, surprise, surprise, based on the way that you breathe. You can control your heart rate and slow your heart rate down if you know how to breathe effectively and efficiently after, excess cardio output. But also with performance, I mean, it's what I was saying before, when you can breathe correctly, all of your awareness is one, not just going into the head. So what you were saying when you feel like, or not what you felt like, but what you found in the studies was that people were, they weren't the player they were at the beginning. It's because all of that kind of anxiety and awareness and energy goes up into the mind, and it's like you disconnect from feeling your body, right? Your body's just acting on autopilot rather than you being in control and having agency. So when you can continuously focus on the way that you breathe, and you can notice the way that you're breathing and stay in the body, stay cool, calm, and collected, and into more of a parasympathetic state, so that you're not going into those feelings of anxiety and your decision making is staying higher, of course your performance is going to get better, right? Your performance is going to increase because you're making better decisions, you're feeling the body, you're noticing the way the body is moving. And then when you have those moments of rest, you can also recover more easily, so that you have enough energy to keep going when you have to go again.
Do you think when we improve your breathing, do you think by improving your breathing, that can definitely improve your performance? So like with a soccer player, they play for 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. Do you think it would make that much of a difference by changing the way you breathe on the pitch? And one of the big questions that I got from one of our parents, and it was a good question, is it one of these things that because the kids are now having to focus on breathing, does that take away a bit from the game as well? Does it distract them? And how do you get around that?
I don't think it's going to distract you if you're focusing on the breathing, because it becomes second nature. So it's something that you just automatically start to do. You train your body, right? So you're training your body to get used to different levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen, which our CO2 tolerance is really linked into our fatigue as well. When you change your breath at the beginning, particularly if you're used to mouth breathing, when you have that output, you do start to feel like you have a bit of air hunger, as we would say, because your body isn't used to breathing in through the nose. So, for the first couple of days or a week or so, you may feel like, okay, I really have to focus on my breathing, but it's not going to distract you from good decision making and strategic moves and whatnot, because you're also keeping your mind calm, right? So it's kind of this trade-off. But then after time, so for me, when I first started, I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to breathe when I'm, doing my spinning bath or going for a run or whatnot. But now it's just second nature. I just never, ever breathe in and out through my mouth. And if I ever catch myself closing my mouth quickly, making sure that I'm like, oh, nope, like I said, you lose your breath, you lose your workout. So, it takes a little bit of practice, of course, but once you get into that habit, because the way that we breathe is a habit, once you get into the better habits of breathing, that will just be an automatic thing that you do. So that's how you're going to keep yourself cool, calm, and collected when you're on the pitch. You're going to be able to, like I said, upregulate yourself, or allow yourself that upregulation as far as the nervous system when you need for energy output, and to bring yourself back into that state of calm as you need as well. So that you can swing between both states and improve your performance overall.
My takeaway from that one, because it's the question that we always asked, was when we should implement breath work and what age groups. But I think listening to your answer to that last question, probably the younger the better, I would say, because it becomes a habit. Is that correct?
Yes, for sure. Definitely. Honestly, if we had a little subject at school when we were kids just to teach us how to breathe, which everyone would roll their eyes and think that's ridiculous, like you said, right? Because, it's the first thing we do when we enter this world. It's the last thing we don't do when we leave. We take a breath in, we take a breath out, and then it's adios. But if we were taught, hey, when you feel angry, this is how you should take a breath to calm yourself, to really, bring yourself back into your body. When you need to focus for your exam, say we're thinking about school, or when you're doing exercise, breathe in this way. it would just become an automatic habit from the beginning. I've taught my niece and nephew several little breathing techniques. And what did my niece always says to my dad, just take a deep breath, Papa, when he's getting angry. And that's the automatic thing that she says to him now, which is very sweet. But yeah, I think the younger the better. You can never start too early with your breathing.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Obviously, you'll get to meet next week. We're going to be doing a live call with some of our athletes. It's going to be good for you to answer a few questions. I'm sure they're going to have some interesting questions for you. Yeah. Now, the next question, it's sort of tiered in 3 layers, and this is probably my favourite question that we got from some of our parents and players. So if we talk about pre, during and post, let's talk about pre-game. Is there something that football or soccer players can be doing 15, 20, 30 minutes before they're about to go and play a 90-minute game that's going to help them prepare for what's about to happen? And what is it they should do?
Okay, so to prepare, I would say using something like box breathing, which is really simple. So using a breathing technique, and then I'll just explain a little easy visualization technique. But box breathing would be breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, exhaling for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4. If you do that 4 or 5 times, you're bringing your nervous system into a state of balance. So anytime we breathe in a equal ratio, so equal in and out, you're actually balancing out the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. You're also bringing in breathing through your nose, so you're actually causing vasodilation through increased nitric oxide. So we also want to breathe through the nose to have nitric oxide. It's going to increase blood flow to your brain and to other parts of your body. So again, we get that higher order decision making. And it's mindfulness, so it brings you into a state of calm because you're focusing on something. So box breathing techniques are actually techniques that are used by many people in high pressure jobs. So say, surgeons or working in the military, for example, these are techniques that those people are taught to bring themselves into a state of calm, focused awareness. So it's not going to make you sleepy, but you're going to feel calm and focused. And I would do that. And then I would spend just a couple of minutes just imagining yourself performing the best that you possibly can. Like imagine your body moving with, precision through the field. Imagine how you're going to feel at the end of the game when when you win or when you score that goal, and try and really use your senses to try and build that vision in the mind. So imagine, like how your feet would feel as you're running through, the field. What, how your breathing would be maintained, what it would smell like, what it would look like, the emotion that you would have. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the thought and the physical reality, so you can actually start to prime your brain for success and create stronger neural pathways that makes your, body and mind say, yeah, I've got this. And this is a lot, again, it sounds like a woo-woo term, but when people talk about manifesting, this is what a lot of that is about. Actually convincing yourself that something is going to happen, and scientifically you're creating the strengthening of the neural pathways in the brain, right? So to do that, and if you practice that for like a while, for every game for a week, if you're playing every single day, or I don't know, every game for a month, if you're playing once a week, you'll notice a huge difference. Your body also responds to your thoughts. They've done studies where there were athletes that were actually training their muscles for strength training, and then there was a group of athletes who weren't allowed to train, but they were just visualizing themselves training, and they also had an increase in muscular strength just from using their brains, and their body was reacting. It's epigenetic. So yeah, it's really interesting. So that's what I would say for pre-game.
Yeah, I love that. We've done a lot in visualization in 2014 and 15. And we had a guy came in from, I think he was from Spain, and he was speaking to us about visualization. And we actually done test models with the players before doing visualization and after doing visualization. And the results weren't like 2% improvements. Like we're talking 60, 70% improvements. But one of the big things that he taught us, and it was a little bit of breathing as well, but it was all around focusing on sort of processes and not outcomes. So like what you said, focus on smelling the grass, running through the grass, making a pass, but not necessarily scoring a goal or winning a match, because that's an outcome. Really focus on processes.
Yep.
And it was a game changer. Like, it blew my mind, and it really led me down a deep hole of reading books and podcasts. And now, during the game, let's say it's half time, and you may or may not have experienced this if you ever played any football or soccer, but half time is probably, and it's meant to be, and it's designed for players to have a rest, but it never is, because this is what happens. The whistle blows, the players race off, a lot of them will run the bathroom, then they're trying to hydrate, then the coach is trying to give them commands, and then they end up rushing back out, and it tends to be very rush and hurried. Is there anything that they could do for 1 to 2 minutes during that half time to give them a bit of a reset? And if so, what would they do?
Yeah, I would say during halftime, in that little period, even while you're on the toilet, you can do it, you know? So if you really haven't got enough time because you're getting all these instructions barked at you, but focus on a breathing technique that in breathwork, we like to call it a whiskey breathing technique, right? Don't drink whiskey when you're playing games. And it's also terrible for sleeping if you drink alcohol. But the whole idea is that it's like taking a shot of whiskey and then feeling sleepy. And so it's not going to make them feel sleepy because their nervous system is going to be upregulated. Also, they're in a rush, right? So they've just been on the field. They're rushing to get all these things done during halftime when they have that break. But focusing on a breath where you breathe in for, say, a count of 4. You can hold your breath for a count of 2, 3, 4 seconds, depending on, you know, how high your heart rate is. And then exhale for a count of 7 or a count of 8. And just do that again 4 or 5 times. So every time we exhale, we actually slow the heart rate down, because the diaphragm, which is the muscle at the base of the lungs, is pushing up on the heart, and it decreases the volume, the space within the heart, and that gives this sensation of increased blood within the heart, blood volume, and that slows the heart rate down and brings you back into more of a parasympathetic state. So it's just going to aid them in that rest and recovery so that they come more into a parasympathetic state, down-regulate the nervous system a little bit using their breath, and then they can continue going with a bit more energy for the rest of the game.
Amazing. That's so useful. Now, to finish off post-game, and the question that I've got around this post-game, is this something that you recommend doing straight after the game, the minute the whistle blows, or are we better doing implementing something once they get showered and go home? What's your prepared, or do we do both?
I mean, the more conscious breathing, the better, right?
Yeah.
So both is always, I will always say, as much as possible. It just depends. So if you're feeling really like excited and happy and over the moon after the game, you don't want to then just like sit down and like do some breathing with your teammates straight away. You want to high five and ride that kind of like high wave of adrenaline, which is also nice and it's also good for you. But I would say bringing your system back into a state of balance after that period, right? So when you can, if you do it directly after, so say you're really sad because you lost or something, balance is really good, but maybe after the shower, breathing in for a count of 5 and then out for a count of 5. That's called a coherent breath. If you were to do that for, say, 5 rounds or so, that's, again, going to bring more of that balance into parasympathetic and sympathetic. So it's going to make you feel much more level within the body, the mind, and your emotions. But it's also this beautiful breathing technique that brings your heart rate coherence more in line. So it's actually the perfect breath. The perfect breath is breathing in 5.5, out 5.5, 5.5 times a minute, 5 liters of air, each breath in and out. That's what they've found. So if you can focus on that, you're just really bringing yourself back to your base level, your calm.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, we've only got a couple of questions to go. I won't keep you much longer, but I want to get this one, and then I like this one as well. So if, let's say we've got a player, whether they're 10 years of age or 18 years of age, but what's the one thing they could implement maybe every morning when they first wake, that's not going to take up a lot of time, but they could do in maybe 2 to 5 minutes, that's going to give them a benefit for the rest of the day? Is there something that they can build as a daily habit?
Yep. 20 breaths. That's all you need to do. I would say 20 conscious connected breaths or up-regulated breaths. It's going to give you a really big boost of energy. It's going to release all of that stale air that you're holding in your lungs from the night before, because most of us, we don't take full deep breaths, right? In our day-to-day lives, we're not fully expanding. We're just kind of breathing into the top half. So we have this stale kind of unused air at the base of our lungs, that is. So if you focus on just taking 20 breaths that are upregulated, it's going to give your nervous system a boost and energy for the rest of the day. You're going to dump excess CO2 that you don't need, and you're going to bring fresh oxygen into the body. So that would literally just be taking a breath in through the nose, really filling up the belly. And then as you exhale, you can exhale quickly through the mouth, like a short, sharp exhalation. Doing that 20 times. And then just let yourself chill for a couple of minutes. You'll be buzzing. Maybe you won't even need your espresso or your coffee in the morning. You know, I hope the children aren't having it if they're really young. We're talking about really young kids as well. But yeah, it's just going to give you that boost. And it's actually really good for your mental health as well. So, you know, it's going to make you feel a little bit happier and, you know, a little bit more emotionally regulated to get on with the day. So it's not just about, you know, physical performance and whatnot, breathing and breath work. It's also a lot about our mental health. More mental state.
I love it. I love it. Now, we've got 2 questions to go, second to last. If you could give one message to every young athlete and player, no matter what sport they play, if you could give them one bit of advice for their careers, what would you give them?
Try not to put too much pressure on yourself. Everything is just one step at a time, right? So, you know, I know that when we look at life and when we look at the things that we want to achieve, we tend to really look at the big picture of everything in one go, right? Like, this is the end goal that I want to get to. And we forget all the small steps that it actually takes to get to that place. And life is all about these little steps in between. It's not about the really big, it's not about the smaller things, it's the smaller things, but it's about the little moments in between, the stepping stones. And if you can just give yourself, you know, if you feel like you are putting a lot of pressure on yourself, give yourself one little thing to focus on per week. You know, am I going to focus on that box breathing before, the recovery breath half game, the relaxation breath at the end, the 20 breaths in the morning? Just do it. And then at the end, feel proud of yourself for just achieving that one little thing that actually altogether, all the smaller things end up being huge benefits for all of us. So yeah, it's the pressure, I would say.
I love that. All right. I feel like that last 40 minutes has just blown by, but final question.
Yes.
So do you believe breathing is one of the most overlooked performance tools, not just in football, but in sports in general today, even in 2026? Or do you think it's being embraced a lot more now? What's your opinion?
It depends on where you are, again. When I was in Europe, there was a big, of course, lots of people also kind of like roll their eyes at it. Even one of my friends, he said to me, like, last year we were talking about my work, and I said, yeah, you should come to a class, you would enjoy it. And he said, you know, like, I've been breathing my whole life, I don't really need someone to teach me to breathe. And he's a cyclist, so he's someone who exercises. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Like you said, sometimes people get bored to it, you know, when life kind of pushes them there. But I mean, there definitely is a lot more emphasis coming onto breathing and breath work. And those who are in it, you know, like how you and I met, and you were like, whoa, this is great. Like, I'm going to come like 3 times a week now. The ones who are in it are really in it, and they feel the benefits. And I like to call the people in my class breathwork junkies, you know, because they come and they're like, they're always on time because they don't want to lose out their spot, for example, and they want to learn about it and they get addicted to it. But the knowledge around it and the education and the accessibility, which seems ridiculous because we all breathe, to breathwork is still not the level where I think it would be. And so I think it does get overlooked in that way. You know, people think like it's something I'll do later. But breathing is something that when you know how to do it properly, it's totally free. It is affecting, like I said, your emotions. It's helping you regulate your nervous system, which is great. It's helping you with your performance, with your recovery. It's going to improve your sleep. It's going to improve your relationships with people around you. It's pretty much a one-stop shop to feeling better, like, mentally, spiritually, physically. So I think it is overlooked. I think it's something that if you are to really dive deep into it and to really take the time to learn about what suits you, it can have so many knock-on positive effects in so many different areas of your life. So, yeah, I think hopefully the industry continues to boom and reaches more and more people.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I hope so. And I just want to say a big thank you for me and everyone at Pro Player Pathway for joining us today. Yeah, as I say, we're super excited to get you on a live call. And yeah, we are going to do a very specific, special podcast, hopefully in the next couple of months, which we'll reveal to all of our listeners, where we're going to get you on screen with us and maybe take you through a little bit of those breathing techniques for everyone who's listening. So a big thank you for joining us, Kate. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And for all of our listeners, guys, we will be back with our next episode in a little over 2 weeks' time. And we look forward to bringing more news and more information. And we hope you all have an amazing week. A big thank you. And I'm just going to finish off and leave you with this short ad break.